My name is Lyla Atta. I am currently a grad student pursuing a combined MD PhD degree at Johns Hopkins University. So this means that at the end of my training, I can be a physician taking care of patients, and I can also be a scientist working to understand how diseases develop and how we can better treat them. My interests varied pretty widely growing up. I was very lucky in that I was encouraged by my parents and my teachers to explore my interests very freely. And so I remember as like a fifth grader, I was super obsessed with the space and the solar system. And I think at some point I had memorized all of like Jupiter's moons and stuff like that. But that didn't last very long. In middle school, I got really into learning about physics and atoms and molecules and how they made up all of matter and all of that stuff. And then it was really in high school that my interest in biology began. And it started with learning about DNA and how it's a code and it can be translated to make proteins. And then sometimes there are mistakes in DNA, and that results in mistakes in the proteins, and that can lead to disease. And I was very interested in kind of how these molecules end up making us, basically. And outside of that, I don't think my interests were like completely confined to STEM. I was really excited to learn new languages. So I grew up bilingual, speaking both English and Arabic. And I remember looking at the world map as a young child and like trying to figure out what language I wanted to learn and like all the languages I wanted to know like, when I was a grown up. And I really enjoyed taking economics classes in high school and in college and learning more about the ways how we've constructed society can kind of shape our daily lives. So like all of this is like a long-winded way of saying like, I had no idea that this is what I would be doing when I was a kid. And it was sort of just me being really lucky to have the opportunity to see where my interests take me as kind of I went through my schooling. Going into college, I knew I wanted to study biology, and I was captured by this fascination of like how do like really small things and seemingly things that we can like characterize very well, like molecules and chemical reactions and things like that. How do they give rise to complex behaviors, things like what color your eyes are, or how the food you eat becomes energy for your body, and even abstract things like how do we think and how do we feel and how do we have memories from just like small molecules and chemical reactions. But at the same time, I wasn't kind of ready to give up all of the other subjects that I had grown up learning about. So I ended up majoring in biological engineering, which kind of combined biology with a lot of different other subject areas. So it used things like physics and chemistry and computer science and math and applied those to better understand biology. And I did a significant amount of research in college and thought that I was going to do a PhD and become a professor and just do basic science research as a career. But towards the end of college, I kind of found that I really missed the interacting and serving people part of a lot of activities that I had started out doing in college. And I really wanted my career to incorporate that as well. So that sort of drove my decision to combine medicine and research and pursue a combined degree. After the end of your training, you have a very diverse set of skills that you can pretty much use and apply in various different ways. So I think the sort of standard MD PhD career path that we come in learning about is sort of this 80% research, 20% clinical skill or clinical duties, but that's definitely not what a lot of MD PhDs end up doing. So a lot of MD PhDs will either pick one or the other. So we'll focus primarily on research or focus primarily on clinical duties, or some researchers will have a different breakdown of how much time they spend doing research versus clinical things. And then some people will do something completely different. They'll go into industry and they'll focus on drug development or focus on figuring out how to best address certain unmet clinical needs from an industry perspective. And then others will go into other career paths like venture capital and focus on how do we best enable biotech companies to address unmet clinical needs. So there's really like a ton of different things you can do with this degree, and I think that's one of the cool things about it. I think the nice thing about medical school and MD PhD programs is that they really don't have a required major to matriculate. There are certain requirements that you have to take, like biology and chemistry and things like that, but those are individual classes that you can satisfy whenever during your college degree. And I think college is really an opportunity to explore your interests, figure out what you're interested in. So like major in whatever you think might be useful, and also whatever you find yourself interested in. Our lab does, in general, computational biology research. So we look at developing computational mathematical tools to help us better understand biology. And specifically, we're interested in variation or heterogeneity in biomolecular systems. So you can have in like the same tissue, in the same organ, in the same person, like a bunch of different cells that are supposedly the same cell type or are supposed to do the same thing, but they exhibit all of these differences between them. And so we want to develop tools that help us systematically understand how different they are from each other, and also understand what these differences mean in terms of how biology functions and also how disease develops. During the PhD part of my training, my day can vary pretty significantly. Last year, I was taking classes, so a lot of my days involved going to Zoom class and doing homework and things like that. But now that I'm done with my courses, I have a lot more flexibility. So usually I'll start my day around 8:30 or 9. I'll spend the first part of my morning answering emails or doing other sort of administrative things. And then I like to spend as much of the rest of the day as possible doing things related to my projects. So doing data analysis or coding up a software package or writing a paper or a grant, whatever needs to be done that week. And then most days I'll stop working around 6 or 6:30, and after that I'll just spend the rest of the evening relaxing, go on a run, make dinner, read or catch up with a friend or something like that. Med school will also vary pretty significantly. I think I can only speak to sort of the what we call the preclinical part of med school, so when you're taking classes. So I would go to class starting at 8, and then depending on the day, finish class between either early afternoon or late afternoon. And then we usually had some other stuff going on in the late afternoon / evening, including our clinical skills class or working in a primary care clinic, which we did in the second year of med school, and then kind of meeting with other students as part of student groups that I was involved in. One of the biggest things I learned, especially in college, was sort of this idea of it's never too late to start learning a new skill. I remember, I think it was during my first semester of sophomore year, I took my first ever computer science class. And I had never taken computer science either in high school or in college. And I found that I really, really liked it. And for a brief moment in time, I considered switching my major again to computer science. But I looked around me and I saw that a lot of my classmates had been doing this for a significant amount of time. A lot of them had been coding since high school or even middle school. And I was very intimidated by that. And I was like, oh, I don't think I can keep up with learning this when all of my classmates have so much more experience than me. And then looking back, I ended up doing computer science stuff anyway later on as it became more relevant to my research. And it turns out that I can learn it, and it's not that bad. And even though I don't have as much experience as other people, it's definitely doable. And I sort of wish that I hadn't kind of dismissed my abilities early on. It's a good idea to kind of just do it anyway and pursue your interests despite any sort of concerns you may have. Okay, not to be super cliche about it, but towards the very end of our preclinical years, we had a class that we called Transition to the Wards, which is basically to prepare us to go on to working the hospital and clinics and stuff like that. And we practiced putting IVs in each other when our classmates, and so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think that was very much a standout memory for me. Learn as much as you can about all of the different things you have an opportunity to learn about. For me, because I'm working in such an interdisciplinary field, I have found that a lot of random things that I learned along the way during my schooling ended up being relevant and critical in really surprising ways in the future. There's really no way to predict what will end up being useful. So learn because it's fun to learn and it's exciting to understand new things and think about things in different ways. And you never know when learning something random will become critical to solving a problem sometime in the future. I would recommend reading The Emperor of All Maladies. Which is a book by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And it goes into the history of cancer treatment and how it has developed and improved over the years. And it really gives some perspective on how far science has come. And it's quite motivating when you're thinking about how you can play a small part in helping to move science forward and how that can end up making an impact in people's lives in the future.